is the beginning. Michelle, that meeting cannot have been called to discuss what you are being told they discussed. That meeting was called to discuss issues other than allocation of money. And those issues are clear. It is about positioning themselves for the post-Uhuru term. That is important for you to understand, Michelle, because what has been happening is that since 1963, this presidency has resided in one particular region. And together with that have been the benefits that accrue from it. In fact, when they say that Mount Kenya region contributes 60% to the GDP, forget the fallacy about it. I'm not so sure that is the correct position. They should be asking themselves, how come one region of the country contributes 60% to the GDP? That in itself is an indictment that more was given to one region, and therefore production has come from that one region. To the contrary, we should be talking about taking that same capacity elsewhere. So the fact that they produce 60% to the economy, as I say, that's fallacious. I do not think that's correct. Should not be a reason for them to be saying that now because we give 60, give us more.
And we'll get to that in just a moment, whether they contribute 60% to the national GDP or not. But let's bring in Professor Omenya for just a moment. The role of Parliament is to represent the will of the people. So when a parliamentary group calls on Parliament to help them articulate development issues in the region, it raises a lot of questions even among the electorate. What do you make of this petition and the context of that meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I think it is it's actually worrying that the leaders that have been elected to satisfy a constitutional mandate can actually come with such ridiculous pronouncements. And it tells you about the governance challenges and problems that we have in Kenya. That although the Constitution of Kenya 2010 was enacted, our politicians are still living in the old era. They don't recognize the Constitution. We know that just the other day when it came to the issue of taxes, and Parliament was purporting that the executive, they believe the executive would figure out the revenue issues, so they didn't look into those. And those were not just parliamentarians from the Mount Kenya region, all of them. So what it tells you here is that although we have a new constitution that bequeaths the power to make those decisions that the so-called Mount Kenya parliamentarians were talking about, they still want to go with the begging bowls, to get goodies from their son, who's president. Basically, the imperial presidency that we're talking about in the previous regime before the 2010 constitutional order. Basically, what this tells you is that we have a lot of people who are pretending to do work in this country who are not working. People who have a mandate which they're not exercising. To go ask the president to favor you on a responsibility that the Constitution has given you means that if my brothers from Central Province, the former Central Province of the so-called Mount Kenya region were serious, they would recall this entire bunch of fools. They're earning money by false pretenses. Their interest is very different. It is to enrich themselves. The pretense to being leaders is actually worrisome. They're actually defeating the Constitution that Kenyans put in place. And in fact,
let's talk more about that Constitution, Professor, because this is the age of devolution. A lot has changed since then. The very same leaders complaining here have control of about 100 million shillings in constituency development funds. And it is also responsible for the passing of the national budget. One, remember that President Uhuru Kenyatta has little control over. So are we talking about a serious leadership crisis in the Mount Kenya region?
In fact, if I was to advise my brothers and sisters from the Mount Kenya area, I would tell them tomorrow, meet urgently and recall these guys, because they have no clue what their role is in the National Assembly. The role is not to go beg from the president what the constitution has given them. And it tells you about the imprudent use of resources nationally and even at county level, that the people who have been given the responsibility to oversight these things, the people given the responsibility to plan, given the responsibility to budget, given the responsibility to oversight the use of resources, are asleep. So yes, it is true that the gentlemen and ladies from the Mount Kenya region met for other purposes, but their pronouncement really is an act of stupidity, and negligence at the highest level in this country. I've never had such ridiculous claims by any segment of elected leaders in this country, be they at county level or at national level. Resources are devolved. The amount of resources that get devolved is oversighted by these same gentlemen. They're the same gentlemen who determine the budget. They're the same gentlemen who prioritize national programs. They're the same gentlemen who give the national government the resources they use.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Mukwana just for a moment to interpret the constitution for us here, because part of what the Mount Kenya members of parliament had to say, and many of them are drawn from the president's Jubilee party, they have blamed 6 cabinet secretaries drawn from the Mount Kenya region for failing to present their issues to the president like other leaders from the Rift Valley region did. So perhaps, Dr. Mukwana, explain it to us. What does the constitution say about the role of parliament and the role of the cabinet secretary? Because as far as we're concerned, the public did not elect any cabinet secretary to represent them directly in parliament.
Michelle, we are getting it wrong. It is not about the constitution here. It is not about those leaders not knowing that they have the capacity to bring development home. It is not that they are unable to reach President Uhuru Kenyatta. Let's get this straight. There has been a feeling nationally that central Kenya, call it Mount Kenya, has had an unfair benefit from the national resources. With the coming to an end of the Kenyatta term, there is a legitimate feeling that their time is up, for lack of a better word. But our brothers from that region and sisters are very, very creative, and I admire them for that. What they are beginning to do is to try and build a scenario that will justify an image that although, yes, we have had a president, but see, we have not been getting development. And for that reason, we deserve a second chance, a third chance, if not at least being near the power. It is a political orchestration that is beginning to build. With time, you'll find rallies and forums where they'll be talking about the neglect of central Kenya, despite the president originating from here. Michelle, let's not be drawn into whether those leaders have the constitutional backing to bring development. That's common sense.
And remember, they were led by Runyenjes MP Cecily Mbarire, who says that the Mount Kenya region must benefit from development projects in the remaining 4 years of the president's term. Again, who is mandated with bringing development projects in this in this region?
That is exactly, Michelle, what I'm telling you. The 4-year, the word 4 years is not there by mistake. It is within these 4 years that this orchestration will build a crescendo and a kind of song and dance in defense of the lack of development in central Kenya will reach a peak. So that by the time the chicken is coming home to roost in deciding who will run for number 1 and who will run for number 2, the image that shall have been created is, we deserve something too, so don't write us out. Remember, they said that they gave President Uhuru 6 million votes. And remember, they also said that they have not been able to reach the president. Do you believe that all those members there are unable to reach the president? It is an orchestration. So let's not swallow this trick. Concentrate on the fact that they now realize that they need to ensure a continuity of the privileges that they have been getting over the period of time. And to do that, they must be squarely in the center of power. How do you justify being in the center of power when the national psyche is against that continuation? You must come up with a theory that despite having the presidency, you have been neglected. Michelle, we have an imperial presidency.
Now, I want us to take a break on the big story. When we come back, we'll also bring in Professor Alfred Omenya as we, focus on the Mount Kenya declaration there to President Uhuru Kenyatta as well as Parliament. This is the big story. To keep your opinions coming on the hashtag The Big Story.
This is KTN News.
Niaje, want to invest in a biashara that will take your hustle to the next level?
Say you'll be there every day, 'cause I'm here counting on you.
Then partner with Betin, the fastest growing biashara in Kenya today. Open a Betin shop wherever you are. You don't want to miss this great opportunity.
Say you'll be there every day,
Grow Nasi.
betting on you.
Happening in the den, where lions prowl and brave Kenyans come seeking investment.
Explain to us why your business is worth 33 million.
100 million valuation. How does that come about?
It's quite a weak proposition for me.
I've been listening very keenly, and I understand what you're doing.
This definitely has legs.
We didn't know it would be this easy.
That is the first time we've heard that in the den.
Tune in tonight and watch the show that's got Kenyans hanging at the edge of their seats. KCB Lions Den, every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. on KTN.
Company. This is KTN News. KTN Prime Highlights in association with KCB Bank.
He was living in the house of the second accused, driving the second accused car with no known source of income since 2017.
Joy for journalist Jackie Maribe and tears for Joseph Irungu as court gives bail application verdict.
We're satisfied that the process is going well.
A few hitches experienced as 1 million candidates sit their final primary school national examinations. It's end of an era as a former long-serving Nairobi town clerk, John Gakur, dies while serving a jail term.
We know that Mount Kenya region contributes over 60% of our country's GDP, yet only 20% comes back to its people.
And in politics tonight, just what do Mount Kenya politicians want? Our reporter analyzes the just-ended retreat.
Parenting, schooling, building, investing, saving, or maybe retiring.
Achieve your dreams with the KCB Gold Savings Account. Enjoy Kenya's highest earning interest rate by visiting any KCB branch today and opening a KCB Gold Savings Account. KCB Bank. Go ahead.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back to the big story. In studio tonight, we speak on a two-day retreat in Naivasha for leaders from the Mount Kenya region, which ended with what we are calling a dishonesty declaration tonight. Let's first listen in to what the leaders had to say.
Know that Mount Kenya region contributes over 60% of our country's GDP, yet only 20% comes back to its people. We have therefore called upon the Commission of Revenue Allocation, CRA, Parliament and other relevant agencies to ensure that the region gets its fair share of resources when it comes to development and implementation of the second generation formula.
In studio tonight, Dr. Alutalala Mukwana, who is a lawyer, as well as Professor Alfred Omenya, governance and policy expert. Professor, let me begin with you. Runyenja's Member of Parliament, Cecily Mberire, they're saying they contribute more than 60% to Kenya's GDP, and that is why they need more allocation of resources and more development in the region. How is it that one region can contribute more than 60% to the country's GDP?
Of course, that's a big fat lie. We know that. We know Central Kenya, Mount Kenya does not contribute 60% of the GDP. But not just that statement, but there are quite a number of lies that have been generated from the statement by the so-called Mount Kenya group, including the number of voters that elected the president. My concern is actually the extent to which this group and others will be using fake news, direct misinformation to push an agenda. And I think this is something we need to be concerned about.
Right.
It has started very, very early. My next concern with that particular group is the totally problematic politics, identity politics. We've seen that in the West. The problem are always others. In the US, the problem are the Mexicans. In Europe, the problems are immigrants. In Kenya, the problems is everybody else, apart from those who come from Mount Kenya, who don't contribute much to the economy, who did not elect the president, who didn't do many other things. This results in what I call othering. And that's a very dangerous type of politics that is a politics of exclusion. It is a politics of marginalizing others. It is a politics of pushing superiority of your identity. In Kenya, unfortunately, that identity is only limited to tribe. It doesn't go to gender, it doesn't go to race, it doesn't go to many other things. So although, yes, we might be smiling at the misinformation that has been generated by this particular group, but the seeds that we are seeing are seeds that could eventually result in instability, that could eventually result in marginalization and so on. That lie aside, the vision of the Constitution and the vision of development of this country that was laid very well after the 2010 Constitution looked at very equitable development of this particular of this country.
Right.
Some of us are even concerned that we are no longer talking about lapset. Bashir Haji Major highlighted some of those things. This was in Vision 2030. We are seeing reinforcement of development in sections of this country that were already very well developed. We are seeing the south of the country receiving a lot of support, not just central Kenya. So I think if we're to analyze what happened today, the last few days in this particular country, it's very deleterious to the nationhood that we hope to have as Kenyans, very, very deleterious to a balanced development that we need for this country. Of course, it's pretentious and deleterious, actually, to national cohesion ideas that are embedded in the Constitution. We should be concerned.
Dr. Mukwana, do you agree with the say? Because when we speak about divisive politics, we'll be talking about trying to ensure more equitable distribution of resources, more equitable distribution of development across the country. But so gutsy is this group of parliamentarians from the Mount Kenya region that they now want the formula for sharing cash and allocating cash to counties and constituencies changed. What they're advocating for now in a proposal is that the allocation should be based on population, excluding any other parameters that the Commission for Revenue Allocation uses, like the size of an area and the level of development at the Commission. Specifically, during that meeting, one of them, that is Mkuruini MP, Gadhika Kiai, specifically said that allocation of funds should not be based on the size of the county, but on population. An example he gave is that Garissa County has the same population as Ruiru constituency, yet the county gets more money than the constituency does. Now, based on that alone, is this a group of parliamentarians preaching peace or divisive politics in the country?
Thanks, Michelle. Divisiveness and the amount of development. Let me begin by the last one, and thanks, Prof, for coming closer to what I was saying.
That's what you're advancing.
Number one, if the leaders from Mount Kenya were genuine and honest about increasing the level of funds in their region, they should be heard loud and clear supporting the proposal to increase the percentage of revenue shareable between the national government and the devolved governments. To 50, for example. Because with the coming of the new constitution, Michelle, there has never been a perfect legal way of bringing development in the regions than the devolution concept. And therefore, the fact that they are talking outside the need to increase devolved funds packages what they are saying as hypocrisy, concealed in what they are saying, development. But as I said, I like the approach because they are very creative politically. And I have no idea why the other tribes have never learned, so that each one is able to craft and innovate their political survival and hence enhance their economic mainstay. Divisiveness. I am a firm believer, Michelle, that the conversation around development in this country must center on the tribe. This is where most of us naturally go wrong. If only we chose to talk about what are the interests of tribe X, what are the interests of tribe Y, and have a genuine national dialogue, because there is no collective interests. Interest always begins at the individual personal level. Even as a person, you have a personal interest, then it comes to a family interest, and by extension, to everybody's interest. So we must begin by the tribe. Nothing wrong in talking about what should be best for Kikuyus.
Right.
What should be best for the Ogiek, Abalu, and so forth. Once we have this conversation, then we'll stop seeing at our brothers and sisters from Mount Kenya as espousing divisive politics. Because what they are good at is actually coming up with mechanisms to enhance their interests. And there's nothing wrong in that. It becomes wrong when, because of their perceived closeness to power, they use that closeness to enhance their interests to the detriment of the other tribes. Right. That is where the divisiveness comes in. But the sad thing, if I may finish, the saddest thing is that our national leaders